Hi, everyone. It's Talk Back. Welcome. We have with us a guest who is now an author. I'm asking everyone the question, what is it like to take your life experiences and turn them into a political treatise of a sort by taking what you've learned from living, what you see out there in the world, how you can try to make it better. And that's what Chris Rivers has tried to do in this brand new book that I'm holding up. You Shouldn't Have to Kill to Get Ahead. It's a very provocative title, I must say. We'll have to figure out what does he mean by that. Reimagining wealth, power, and belonging in America. And what does it say about America when the clearest path to opportunity runs through a battlefield? So now let me turn to Chris. Hi.
Hi.
All right, so let's set the stage. You were born here in Connecticut, right?
That's right.
And then you went away for a while. You did a lot of stuff on the battlefield in D.C. You came back. You've run for office. You have a big job in like a think tank, and now you spent the last year or so writing this book. Okay, one, why did you write this book?
So I wrote that book originally for myself. It really started as a mental health exercise after the 2024 election, where I was out knocking on thousands of doors as a candidate for state representative. And the conversation I was having with MAGA supporters, with progressives, with people in the middle, people who are not tuned into politics, versus the conversation that we were having as a country on the national landscape were two very different conversations. And after I saw the results of the elections, it was myself with my dog at home. My wife is on active duty service. And so we were just in this home by ourselves, and we just wanted to put down ideas of how do we get to now? How do we get to a point in this country where so many of us are so angry all the time? And the idea of actually using politics to actually debate real solutions to the problems that we all have seems like it's a really naive point to make, but that's what politics was meant to be. And so that's where the book came from, is me trying to take some time for myself to understand how do we get to such a dysfunctional system.
Okay, so of course we're going to have to ask why you think the system is dysfunctional. So one of the main themes running through the book is the idea, you don't use the exact term, maybe you do, the American dream. The thing that I grew up with as a kid many years ago that I thought my parents told me, even as a woman in the years before the women's movement, Sheila, you can be anything you want in America. There is opportunity for everyone. And basically in this book you're saying that's not true. Is that right?
I'm saying that's not true for everyone. And specifically right now in the moment we're living in, it's becoming less and less true. So let's take a couple high-level statistics. Right now in the United States, the most likely indicator of how successful a young person will be is however successful their parents are. That's not education, it's not their own merit, it's not their own talent.
It's structure, status, okay.
Yep. And, oh, by the way, like when you look at the wealth over the generations. So my grandfather is a perfect example, someone who barely graduated from high school, factory worker, able to raise 6 kids, have a boat, have a cottage, and worked 40 hours a week. My dad is an industrial mechanic who I love dearly, and he and my mom would work part temporary jobs, and they were able to raise a family, own their own house. Now, the average person is working more hours, earning less per hour, while costs like healthcare, costs like housing, costs like electricity, costs of an education have gone through the roof, multiples. And so that's where I believe in the American myth and the American dream, and I'm an example of it. But when you look across the entire population, it's decisions that were made decades ago that make it really hard for people today.
But in your book, you're kind of saying that one of the only reasons I got ahead is because I went into the military, and through that, I was able to go to West Point, and through that, I was able to go to Georgetown, and through that, I was able to go to the State Department. But you're saying that somehow in America, the military is one of the only rungs up that can take you up that ladder to the American dream. Isn't that what you're saying here?
That is one of the very few rungs left. So the military opens access to things like free college, which most people don't have access to. So whether you go to West Point or you go to a state school and the National Guard, the Army can pay for it, you can actually go get your undergraduate education without having to take on student debt. One of the few accesses we have if you don't have enough money to be able to go to college without taking on debt. It's not the only path, but for my town, from my lived experience of Naugatuck, Connecticut, most of the people I grew up with are either still there and worse off than their parents are, economically speaking, or they joined the military.
Okay, so I hear what you're saying of it, because I do remember the post-World War II, the 1950s, when America started to be the real engine of opportunity and took over the power in the world, really. One person in a family, the breadwinner, whether it was usually the husband, but it could have been the other, their income could take care of all of the family's needs, as you say, and your father could still afford a boat and all that. And we cannot have that today. Somehow our whole economic way of doing things has changed in a way that does not benefit the majority of Americans. That's what you're saying.
That is exactly what I'm saying, and I'm glad you brought that up, because it's a perfect time in our history as a country to look at the big picture, which is really hard to do in politics. But if you go from right after World War II until about 1980s or so, we've had more access to opportunity, more access to education, genuinely more people able to climb the economic ladder than at any point in our history. And then from 1980 till now, all of that has been on the decrease. And when you look at that, I think the obvious question to start asking is, well, what the heck happened in the 80s? And the answer to that, I would suggest, is, well, our national leaders, President Reagan and others, decided to take a different philosophy towards how government needs to work and how our economic system needs to work. And they basically put into law a whole bunch of different things to say, we want to maximize the levers of government to maximize corporate profits. And that didn't hit right away, but in the 1980s is when we went from a nonprofit healthcare insurance system to a for-profit healthcare insurance system. That's when we started slashing corporate tax rates. That's when we started to deregulate corporations. That's when we started to add a whole bunch of deregulatory things for corporate governance that allows CEOs to earn shares instead of being paid and taxed appropriately. And all of that, 40 years in the making, ends up making it really hard for average Americans to get ahead, while corporate profits have never been higher.
Okay, so that's an analysis, and we'll kind of get back to it.
Sure.
But did you write the book to give your analysis? Did you write the book to ask people to call them to action to do something? Did you write the book to unburden yourself of some of the issues and secrets of your childhood that maybe you hadn't talked about before? Or were all three things the reasons that you wrote the book?
All three things, and that's also why the book is in three different parts. The first part, yes, I wanted to unburden myself, but I wanted people to understand where I'm coming from. And so the first part is very much my life story. The second part is the political or policy analysis that I think every American should know as a baseline. And then the third part is what can we actually do about it? And it's a call to action to say, everyone can play a part here. So get off the sideline.
And so why did you think it was important to talk about your background and in the memoir type of writing that you did? And I don't know if you want to talk about some of the things that you said about yourself in that. Can you do that? I would like to talk about that and see how that impelled you to the other areas in your life and what influence they had on the things that you did and the things that you now feel both emotionally and politically. Because there's a lot of emotion connected up in that first section, isn't there?
There is. There's a lot. So I think what you're referring to is really early in the book, I write about how I was raped as a child.
Okay, I wasn't even getting to that one. I was getting to the fact that even in your family, you felt somewhat as an outsider, that that felt somewhat as an outsider in your school areas, and they did not quite figure out how your intellect worked. They thought maybe you were behind in some way, but you really weren't, and you caught up, and that feeling, to even before the rape question.
Sure.
So that outsider feeling that you had, is that something that still is inside of you that you still feel today?
I still feel it today, but when I was a child and when you're a kid, I think what you're really searching for is someone to be protecting you, someone to be providing for you so you can go explore and be a kid and play. And so when I was a kid, I really looked at it and said, boy, I really wish I felt safer. As an adult, I kind of look at it more as a superpower because we have so many tools at our disposal that generate groupthink. We have social media that gives you what you want to see to emotionally trigger you in the way that you want to be entertained. We have nothing but entertainment available to us 24/7 days, 7 days a week to help us feel comfortable. And I think having a very uncomfortable childhood got me used to growing every single day on my own and not relying on other people to tell me how to grow. And I think that has paid off dividends decades later to say it's okay to think differently. It's actually really, really good that we do have people that think differently. And to really lean into that is where seeing and thinking differently can lead us all to a better place. So yes, the rough childhood I had, that.
But compared to some of the serious poverty, some of the serious domestic violence, yes, assaults and rape, and you had some experience. When you look back, I think you've said in other later chapters that maybe I had a nice childhood. Do you use that? Do you know that you did that in later chapters?
Absolutely.
How did you analyze all of that? Come back that way?
Well, the reason why I come back to it is because you kind of hear this conversation going on in our country right now that says even the poor people in America have it way better than poor people in other countries. And I've been to those other countries. I've been to war-torn countries. I've been to non-war-torn countries that have a lot of true poverty to a level of degree that like is hard to imagine here. But I also, in reflecting on that, recognize that we have more money than we've ever had. We have more money in the history of the planet in this one country than we've ever had access to. And the fact that even my own childhood was better than most other people on the planet doesn't alleviate us of the problem of trying to make the system more fair for everyone.
Got it. You make that connection.
Yeah.
So do you want to talk about the sexual assault that you experienced as a child? Because do you think that some of that was as a result of your being somewhat of a loner? Was that part of the equation there?
I suspect, and I'm not an expert here, I only know what I lived through, but I expect the predators that are out there, the people that would prey on other people, have a way of identifying the sort of outliers, and I was probably an outlier. With that being said, the other parts of that, though, isn't just what happened. It's how do you reconcile that? How do you fit back into a community? When I was a kid, the anti-gay political rhetoric was everywhere. Mm-hmm. When I was a kid, we just didn't have a national conversation about sexual violence, sexual assault.
Even though it was all happening in the shadows.
It was all happening in the shadows, and it's still happening now.
Yeah.
And I think that's why the Epstein files at the national level is definitely hitting a nerve. And I think if we really want to have an opportunity to have it be different, then we have to start talking about it. Those of us that it happened to, if you're comfortable, should start talking about it.
So how did you process it once? I know you said when it was going on, you weren't able to really deal with it. But over the years, and now you've written about it, was the writing somewhat of a catharsis?
So I have actually written about it for therapy before, but only myself and my therapist has ever seen it. This was the first time I actually wrote it down with the intent of anyone outside of myself, my therapist, my spouse, seeing it. So it was a revelation for a lot of people in my family. It was a revelation for a lot of folks. But the thing that has really given me a lot of hope by talking about it is how many other people have said they've had similar experiences and have kept it to themselves for decades and decades and decades, because we don't talk about it as a society, and so it doesn't feel comfortable to talk about.
Although we are talking about it more. I mean, so many episodes have come out of public people, whether it's through the church or other, and of course the Epstein stuff. So it's something that people feel a little more comfortable. And I'm sure that played a part in your putting it in your book too, I'm sure, right? The fact that people would maybe identify with that. So I guess my question is, from the rough areas in your childhood, from the sexual assault issues, how did that influence your later years and your opinion of the world, of the culture that we're living in, that you're sort of criticizing now and telling us we've fallen short to what we need to do for kids like you?
I think three things. One, especially in recent years, there's this conversation about what it means to be a man. And I really think part of being manly needs to be focused on protecting other people. That's part of the reason why I went and joined the Army in the first place. I wanted to go, first of all, learn the skills to actually be able to take care of myself, and also learn the skills to protect others.
Empathy.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that we lack in a lot of our leaders. Yeah, go ahead.
Empathy, and in my opinion, part of protecting other people is identifying when they need to be protected, right? When is it just normal struggle? When are they really struggling that needs some help and protection? And so that's part of it. Another part of it is this idea that, sorry, what was the original question? The empathy part kind of screwed me up.
Well, how you use your experiences
right.
starting out, yeah.
Yeah, so wanting to protect other people. The second part is seeing how much good was happening in my church, seeing how much good that my parents, even though they didn't have a lot, were trying to do for other people, and just recognizing that if we actually all look out for each other, we're in a better place. And yet we've created political decisions that says you're all in it for yourselves. And that disconnect between what average, everyday, good Americans are doing and living out versus the values that we embedded in our systems contradict each other right now. It hasn't always been the case, and we've never lived up to our ideals, but the direction we're moving in is deeply troubling in that perspective. And then the third part is simply, we as an individual need to always keep growing. We as a country, as a society, always need to keep growing. And sometimes that means getting uncomfortable. For me, as a kid, growing up in a town like Naugatuck, getting uncomfortable meant serving in the military when no one else in my family had done it. And then going to war and seeing what that actually looked like firsthand. To know that, hey, decisions matter. National debates matter. And it impacts not just thousands, hundreds of thousands of Americans' lives, it impacts millions of lives of people overseas. And so connecting that all together, the last point I'll end here for this question is just to say, when you do that, when you go to war, when you see people in other countries, when you really step outside of what is comfortable, you start to realize most humans are basically the same. We all want very similar things. And once you realize that we actually have way more in common than divides us, then the opportunity to see each other for who we are, going back to the empathy point, becomes the standard frame, not the thing that you're searching for.
And so many psychologists, philosophers will talk about what you just said, that most people have within them the ability to be good and kind, but if a leader comes along who can give them permission to be the opposite, to be cruel, to be insulting, to be hurtful, people will take it, right? And that's some of what maybe is happening in our country today.
I think that, and in addition to that, when you feel like there's plenty to go around, when you feel like you're living in a country, in a land that genuinely has opportunities and there's plenty to have at it, it's pretty easy to be empathetic. Once it starts feeling like there isn't enough to go around and what you get, I don't get anymore, and that might actually feed to my survival or my status or my belonging to a group, boy, it becomes really easy for a lot of people to take that scarcity mindset and say, I need to fight for this in every nasty way possible. And then you have a national leader like Trump come and add the permission structure to it all. Then I think you see a lot of the pent-up anger and rage and disappointment come to the forefront, not because Trump himself causes all of it, but he allows that sort of dam to break. But we also have to recognize that we have decades of building that scarcity mindset in the first place.
Yeah, okay. So let's just summarize some of the things in your childhood. We touched on them, but go through. You started out in Naugatuck, and tell us how you progressed from there in school and up through to military.
Sure. So born and raised in Naugatuck, mom and dad, working class folks, and I was diagnosed with learning disabilities as a child.
What kind of learning disabilities? I mean, I read it in the book, I'm thinking, what exactly? Was it dyslexia? Was it, you don't even know?
I don't know the medical term. I remember when the speech pathologist and the other experts tested me, the layman understanding was that my brain would operate far faster than my mouth, my speech, my writing could ever keep up with.
Is that the case today, or did It is. You
It
think
absolutely is.
So is that a learning disability, or is that just a quirk of your particular brain?
I think it depends on how you frame it. If you're in an educational institution where learning basic math is done by mad minutes, where you're given 60 simple math problems in a minute to solve it, well, if your brain is solving the one on the second row when you're writing the answer on the first row, that's going to look like a disability to the educational system. But if you learn how to control it, if you learn how to manage it a bit, the ability to just sit back, close your eyes, and let your brain work at its speed, and then come back and slow everything down so you can actually communicate effectively,
So
then it's a bit of a superpower.
Did they give you therapy? Did you have, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. But you succeeded, you did well in school though. Academically, you still did well. Isn't that true?
I did okay in school.
Okay.
I wouldn't say I was, my brother and sister did better than me, so for everything I could see, I was not living up to the potential my family expected. But compared to those around me, I was top middle of the class. And it was just one of those things that, because I was in special education, rode a different bus than other students and was treated differently, that my parents sat me down one day and said, hey, stop worrying. Like, you always have a place with us. You can live at home forever. It's okay. And I just remember at a very early age saying, I don't know what my future is going to be like. I just know I want to do something different than that.
So how did you get out of that mindset? Because clearly you don't have that now.
No.
You've overcome that completely.
I really think for me, it came down to just having enough faith to take one small step. So when I went from elementary school to middle school, from fifth grade to 6th grade, I had an opportunity where the special education room was in the library that had the permission slips back in the day before the internet. And I took one of those permission slips and wrote and forged my mom's signature to get me out of all special ed classes. And the school just accepted that. They never checked on it. My mom never asked. And so I just went into quote unquote regular school, and I kind of had to teach myself the things that I missed from elementary school. And while that was a really, really rough transition from elementary school to middle school, I also learned I could do it. It was tough, but boy, teaching yourself all of that stuff you're supposed to be taught also encourages you to realize that the teachers are great, they're there to help, but really you can take ownership of this. And if you learn that as a young age here in America, then there's nothing that can stop you if you just never stop learning.
Okay, so did you go to Naugatuck High School? Is that?
I went to Naugatuck High School. I applied for West Point when I was a high school student, did not get in the first time.
Okay.
And so I enlisted in the Connecticut National Guard. I went to basic training between junior and senior year of high school when I was back in my senior year of high school.
So the military was something that you were thinking about even when you were in high school, right? Obviously.
Yeah,
Why?
it was, I like the idea of being able to serve my country. I was also in high school when 9/11 happened. And the fact that we were attacked really felt like we needed to go protect this country at the time. And for those like us who are old enough to remember the post 9/11 mentality, it was very much we're all Americans, and it was a very patriotic couple years.
And then not just we're all Americans, but we got to go fight and beat somebody up.
Right, which probably was a mistake in hindsight.
Okay,
But
and you went there.
And I went
Tell
there.
us about that. You were in Afghanistan, right?
Yep. So I was in Afghanistan. I led about 150 what we call route clearance missions. So those missions are driving around at 2 miles per hour trying to find the buried explosives that are in roads, which sounds intense, and it is, but it is hours upon hours of boredom and then moments of terror, what just happened, and reacting to the Taliban.
And when you were there,
intentions.
was there what they call esprit de corps, where everyone agreed, we have to, this is the mission that will save our country, that will help America, we're getting to the Taliban and the Al-Qaeda? Or was there a disquietude or a feeling of, well, maybe this isn't the right mission? I mean, how did you feel about that?
When we first got there, it was just solely, what's our job, and we need to get it done. You're so focused at what is happening in front of you, the bigger picture questions don't usually come up. But in one of the missions I was running, one of my trucks hit about 100 pounds of explosives. Truck flips in the air, soldiers get pulled out, one broke a leg, lost a leg, and those soldiers got medevac, so a helicopter came in, took them out, and they were in Germany by the time we even got back to base, because our mission was about a month long, and that was 3 days into it. After that, a lot of my soldiers started asking, why are we still here? Because I was leading troops in Afghanistan a full decade after we originally invaded.
How long was your tour of duty there?
A full year.
Oh yeah, that's a long time.
It's a long time, and it's a long time to be out in the sort of rural Afghan countryside, putting our lives at risk every single day to do this incredibly dangerous job. And it's fair to sit back and ask, why were we sent here in the first place? I think we all knew when the story was, we're going after Osama bin Laden, it's right after 9/11. That was a story most people could get their heads around. But by the time 2011, 2012 comes around, we know Osama bin Laden's nowhere in Afghanistan. We don't know at that point where he was exactly. But you kind of wonder, what are we still doing here? We know that the idea is this idea that we just need to bolster Afghan military, we need to bolster the Afghan government so we can one day leave. But on the ground, it didn't really look like that was
working on the ground.
Yeah.
So up until that point, were you political in any way? Obviously, you voted, I guess. You registered. Did you register as a Democrat?
I registered as a Democrat when I was 18.
Okay. But when you were in Afghanistan and in the military, what was the political vibe then? You know, a lot of people talk about how the military it used to be, or still is, more Republican, more conservative than progressive. Is that true? You experienced that in your years there?
Honestly, most of us in the military don't talk about politics. Most of us in the
You're
military,
not really supposed to, right?
you're really not supposed to. And it's weird because in the military you have a really, really strict hierarchy. So I, as an officer, really shouldn't be talking about politics with anyone that I oversee because you have a lot of power over them, and you really shouldn't use that power to influence their politics, and vice versa. But you could talk about it with your peer groups, and what I would say, sure, maybe there's something too that the military as a whole is slightly more conservative. Maybe, states like Texas probably send more people than states like Connecticut, whatnot. But on a whole, I think most people in the military are far more just pragmatic in what we want from the country than any particular party identification would ever correlate to. So to this day, I have a lot more connections to veterans who are registered Republicans, Democrats, Independents, don't vote, and we can actually have real conversations about politics than if we weren't all veterans, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, I guess it makes sense. So you you went from Afghanistan to what? What happened after that?
So that moment where I was trying to answer these questions for soldiers, and I was giving them as good of answers as I could give, but I realized they weren't good enough for me. So I decided whatever happened in my life, I wanted to go study how government actually works, how international relations and diplomacy is supposed to work. Because my undergrad degree is in physics and nuclear engineering, and I was an Army engineer, and I liked engineering because you actually got to a problem or a real solution from a problem. And so fast forward, after my time in the Army, I was stationed in DC because I was working in the Pentagon as an Army officer, and left my military service and decided to go to grad school at Georgetown, where I did 2 masters, one in public policy and the other is in international relations, to try to answer those questions.
And you were still in the military while you went to grad school?
No, I had gotten out.
Oh, you had gotten out by then. Okay.
So I'm at Georgetown studying how this stuff actually works, getting access to some of our national leaders, would be having dinners with people like Chuck Hagel, be having dinners with Madeleine Albright, be having opportunities to take classes on Capitol Hill. And you really get not just the academic training to how to understand policy and politics and whatnot. You really get to meet these people in the flesh, not the caricatures that we see on TV. And you realize whether you agree with them or disagree with them, they're also just people trying to use their best judgment in the moment. And the reality is most of us can do it. And so that's when I started to realize, oh, the way I've thought about politics from a working class family perspective, that there are really educated people that are genuinely more intelligent than we are, better educated, better trained. Some of that might be true, but it was made that way. Like, they're not inherently better than anyone else.
And when did the West Point come into the picture?
So West Point was after my first deployment to Kuwait, and I did some time in Iraq. I retook my SATs in Kuwait and then applied for West Point again, got in.
Right. Okay.
Did my time at West Point.
West Point before Georgetown.
Before Georgetown.
Okay, right. So what did the West Point experience tell you about moving up the ladder and about getting to that American dream?
So I think one of the things that most people don't know about West Point is that West Point is one of the few institutions we have left where it is genuinely a meritocracy. Everything you do is graded: your physical performance, your sports performance, your academic performance, your military performance, and you're all wearing the same thing. You can't tell how rich one family is over another. There are kids who parents are 4-star generals. There are also kids like me who come from working class families. There are people from all 50 states. And you get put into this academic program where there is always 30 hours of work to do every 24 hours. And no matter how good you are across the board, there is something that you're not good at, and it will expose you.
So you're saying West Point is a bigger equalizer than American universities and corporate world? And, yes?
Absolutely.
And is that where this title came from? You shouldn't have to kill. When you say kill, what do you mean? You shouldn't have to go into the American Army to give service that way in order, so that was your entree to get ahead? Is that what you're saying? Can you just clarify that for us?
Yeah, so this title has actually 3 different meanings.
Okay.
The first meaning is what you're getting at,
Okay.
which you shouldn't have to go fight in wars in order to get a free education to get ahead in a country that's the richest country in the history of the world. The second meaning is we have now an entire generation of people out there in the workforce who are working so hard.
They're killing
themselves. Are killing themselves. And we shouldn't have an economic system that is maximizing profits over people to the point where people are literally killing themselves.
Okay.
And then the third part is, when I started writing this book, the polling and the science was saying about 1 in 5 Americans thought we needed to use violence to correct the political direction of the country. By the time I was finished writing the book, it's 1 in 3.
So you wrote this book after 2020, after 2024 even.
That's right.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So you lived through the first Trump and then the Biden and the whole thing.
Yep.
January 6th and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that, I get it.
That, and also, yes, our American lived experience that you were just getting to, but the amount of economic inequality we have now was about the same as what we had that led up to the French Revolution. The economic inequality we have now has led to the Great Depression. The economic inequality we have now has led to wars and depressions and other things in the past. And the reality is, if we don't do something about it, it's going to likely end bad. But the benefit we have is we have all this history to learn from. And we could just make better decisions to avoid it all.
Yeah. Some of this would say that even when the politicians are making the right decisions, that the cycle of depression and recession is almost inevitable, and it just kind of happens throughout history, and we're just victims of it. Can we get around that, according to what you're thinking?
I would counter that point, because I've heard it several times by people that I really respect, and I would just say, if you could predict it, you can change it. So if you know you're heading in that direction, you can choose to move in a different direction.
I mean, and the other thought that comes to my mind is we have this two-party system in this country. So for 4 years, we have one political philosophy, and they have the right to pass these laws. Let's say it's a progressive philosophy, so we pass laws about the environment, and we raise the minimum wage, and we have infrastructure, and we have all kinds of regulations to whatever. And then the next time, this is happening right now, so now we have Trump, and he's undoing every environmental regulation, every civil rights regulation, everything that we think the progressive movement, both economically and politically, should provide for us. That's just the way our system almost kind of works, in a one step backwards, forwards. How do you get around that?
I would say that's the way our system works right now. And I would say that's in part because what we have been proposing have often been Band-Aids on systemic issues. So raising the minimum wage, the federal minimum wage.
Well, it hasn't been raised in ages. So
hasn't been raised in ages. And so the little bit of raises that it has had hasn't really solved anything for anyone. But we tout it as a huge accomplishment. Different states are doing different things on that. But to the large part, the economic engine that we created to maximize profits so people aren't getting a fair wage. So companies like Walmart are getting subsidized because we're providing food benefits through SNAP to their employees who are working full-time jobs.
Didn't they just become the biggest trillion dollar company in the world or something?
Something like that. It's huge. It's massive. And yet, like, we kind of just take it for granted, this ideology that we can't do anything about it. It's just the way that it is, and it's just broken, and we have to deal with it. But if we look at our own history, if we look at the time that you already brought up, right after World War II, we didn't have this massive swinging from one to the other. We had this idea that government should be put to work to help people in their everyday lives. And we can debate the exact role of Social Security. We can debate the exact amount. We can debate the nuances of it. But when Eisenhower took over as a Republican, he didn't immediately try to undo the entire New Deal. He adjusted things, he modified things, but by and large, the idea that the government should be used as the rule maker to make sure that companies stayed in bounds of that, the idea that government should provide for people, wasn't this wild swing that we had.
So when you get to your analysis, you say up until 1980, even though we had maybe a Republican and then a Democrat, there was a consensus that government had a purpose to make some regulations and help people lead their lives better. Maybe the Democrats wanted to do more regulations, but still the framework was the same.
The basic underlying assumptions were the same.
And you're saying that when 1980 rolled around, Ronald Reagan came in and said, government's not supposed to help anybody, it's the problem. He said that. And I keep saying, if the president of a corporation or a university or any organization makes his opening inaugural remarks and says, you know, this company stinks, and it's the problem, it's not the solution to anything. You're right. It changed the generation of the way we look at America. And you're right. The Republican Party has been trying to undo the New Deal from the 30s forever. They want to undo Social Security, the whole thing, right? That's the fight that we've been in all these years. So, so you analyze it this way. What else are you analyzing in terms of the disparity between of wealth between the lowest classes up to the top? How has that changed over these last 40 years? That's amazing.
Yeah, so over the last 40 years or so, we have transferred about $50 trillion worth of wealth from the bottom 50% to the top 10%. And the way we do that is a little bit out there for anyone to see. We do it through stock buybacks. In 2024, and by the way, stock buybacks were not legal before Reagan took office. They made it part of Reaganomics to make stock buyback legal. And so the whole philosophy of trickle-down economics is to say, hey, some people are better, smarter, better able to use this money to benefit everyone, in theory. And so if you just give them more power, more money, then what they do for everyone will create more jobs, will create more economic growth, all of this stuff, which, by the way, has never turned out to be true.
Which people call socialism for the rich and capitalism for the poor. The poor are expected to raise themselves up by their bootstraps, right?
Absolutely.
But we're going to give the capitalists, the entrepreneurial class, we're going to give them extra benefits, tax breaks, so they can start their stuff and it will trickle down to us. And has it ever worked?
No, it has never worked. It hasn't worked here. It hasn't worked in any other country that we tried it. And we've tried it now 4 or 5 major times of these tax cuts for the ultra-rich. And it has never led to more jobs, more economic growth, or anything that they promise. And the reason why I brought up stock buybacks is like they're the perfect example, because a company makes all this money and they make so much profit, which, by the way, the profit margins from 1980 till now have doubled. And so in a given year, we make about $4 trillion worth of profits. And then out of that $4 trillion, companies look around and say, hey, should I invest this money? Should I pay my people better? Should I do something with it? Or should I just buy back my own stock, thereby increasing my stock evaluation? And because we put into law this idea that shareholder supremacy needs to come first. All we care about are the
shareholders, yeah.
That's what they do. And so in 2024, it's the dollar amount is somewhere around $980 billion just in corporate stock buybacks, just for the 500 largest companies in this country. So they're not reinvesting it. They're just making people who already own the stock wealthier.
Right. And so we've done away with a lot of the pensions, the monthly type pensions, but we still have the 401k. But what percentage of Americans actually own stocks now?
So I would look at it this way. The top 10% of Americans own over 90% of the stock market, the entire market.
Right.
And so we have our 401ks. We do have some pension funds that rely on the stock market, but that is a very, very small portion. So, and that's also what makes it really hard to solve, because if you really try to put rules on it and decrease profits to maximize people's buying power, to maximize people's pay, then the stock market will probably take a hit because the investing class will not like it, and then you'll see it in your 401k. So it's almost this like really tricky nature of this unsolvable problem.
So Christopher Rivers is 14 years old today in America, in Naugatuck. What's his future going to be like?
He is going to be working 30% more than his dad. He is going to be earning about 20% less-ish. He is going to probably not have any realistic chance at actually retiring because Social Security has not been solved yet, regardless of 401k status. He is going to be looking at a housing market if he wants to get married and move into a house where the median house is now over $400,000. He is looking at an annual health care budget of over $15,000 out of his own pocket, never mind what his employer is contributing. He is going to be looking at an educational cost of hundreds of thousands of dollars to even go to a state school to get a 4-year degree. And so he's going to be starting life once he gets through his high school, once he gets into the educational system, hundreds of thousands of dollars in the hole, maybe even up to $1 million in the hole if he wants to buy a house.
And so was that part of the incentive to join the military?
That's part of the incentive to join the military, because the military has allowance for housing, so you can always have housing, and you can also go buy your housing with GI Bill benefits. You can get GI Bill benefits to go get educated or have the military pay for your education. And so it takes a lot of the metrics of the massive rise in costs and give people a way to access it without going into this massive debt themselves.
So you also talk about, before we get to some other specific solutions you talk about, you also talk about the undue influence of money in our political system, as well as the imbalance in wealth in our country. Talk about that, how that has skyrocketed over the years.
Yeah, so I think it's fair, once you kind of understand how unbalanced the economic system, you have to ask yourself, how is this sustainable? And the answer is Supreme Court decisions like Citizens United, we all point to, but...
Say what that did, so people, what did that do?
Yep, so Citizens United, along with another decision we don't talk about as much, basically said that companies, private entities can donate unlimited amount of money and they don't have to disclose it as long as they don't directly coordinate with an individual candidate. So that's what gives the NRA license to put billions of dollars into every election, as long as they run their own ads. They don't coordinate with an individual campaign. They don't have to disclose where that money is coming from. And if you look at how much we spend on elections in a given cycle, over half of it now is what we call super PACs, which is the organizations that get formed in order to take money from anyone and to spend money on anything politically related without disclosing it.
Okay, so that's very bad. But in Connecticut, we do have a little bit better system in our elections, right? And you ran for state representative twice, and you would want that state system to become a federal project too, right?
I would love to have federal elections that are publicly financed in some way, shape, or form. We could adopt the Connecticut model. It's not the only way to do it. But here in Connecticut, as you know, what we do is basically say, if you want to run for a state level office, depending on the level of office, there is a certain amount of money you have to raise. So for a state rep seat, when I ran, it was about $5,500. And you had to raise it from a certain amount of people in your district you're trying to represent. For me, that was about 150 people in the 4 towns I was trying to represent.
And that would prove to the Connecticut people, you are worthy, or you've got enough appeal or enough reach so that now we can give you X dollars towards your campaign, right?
That's it. And once they give you X dollars, about $36,000 when I ran, then you don't get to get money from anywhere else.
Okay.
And so all of your time as a candidate then focuses on actually talking to people.
But you do have the option to self-fund and spend anything you want?
Basically, yeah.
And some people do that because we have wealth in Connecticut. Obviously, some people do. So after all your experiences and you came back, why did you leave D.C.? You had a job in the State Department. You were working in the State Department after your education at Georgetown. Why did you leave D.C. and come back to Connecticut and then run for office here?
So I left D.C. because, one, I left the State Department before I left D.C. because when the first Trump term came in and the chaos in the State Department was massive, and we, as those people who were civil servants, couldn't understand what the direction was because the direction changed multiple times a day, every day, and it didn't make any sense. And so instead of just twiddling my thumbs, accepting my salary from the taxpayer, I decided to put my work into consulting and actually go try to solve problems. And then my wife, who's also a West Point grad, got off of her active duty military obligation. And for the first time in our adult lives, we got to decide where we wanted to live. And we mutually decided, even though she's from Southern California, which this time of year feels really nice to have 80-degree weather, but we decided that we wanted to make Connecticut our forever home. And so we moved here back in March of 2020, right at the beginning of the pandemic. And pretty much once we got back here, I was still doing my consulting work, and I just thought, wow, I have this world-class education from West Point and Georgetown. Maybe I could do some good with it. And
I know you're on the Board of Education
Yep.
in Colchester and serve in that capacity, and you're on the town committee and so forth. So what did you learn from running those 2 times, and how did you apply that knowledge in writing your book?
yeah, so for running for the state office twice, I knocked on about 9,000 doors spread out over those years. And what I learned from doing that is how much power social media has to influence what people think is real. And there's only so much I can do as a candidate.
And you're talking about social media and misinformation more than anything else, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, good stuff can come through it, but misinformation is a powerful, powerful tool.
Is incredibly powerful. And I, as a candidate who only has so much money because of our publicly financed rules, am trying to spend 2 minutes to convince you that I want to go solve problems for you. Well, I also am going up against the 20 hours a day you may be spending on your smartphone consuming misinformation, disinformation through social media. I'm competing with Fox News and their interpretation of what Democrats are going to be, to the point where people ask me what party I am and say, hey, I fought in Iraq and Afghanistan, I'm a West Point grad, and I happen to be a Democrat. And like people's heads would almost explode. And the other part is the way you get trained to knock on doors is very much about me giving you my pitch of why you should vote for me. It would be like calling you and just basically you hearing from a robocall saying, vote for Chris Rivers, he's awesome. And I just never thought that was a good approach. And so I took the strategy of saying, hey, I'm Chris Rivers. I'm trying to represent you to solve problems.
What do you need?
What do you need? Mm-hmm. And what I learned from that, most people have never been asked. Most people in this...
And did you get cogent, good answers? Or is so many people not really aware of what's going on?
I didn't never really tracked it, but I would say probably about half of the people I asked that to had no answer, which is okay. People have busy lives, and you just say, hey, my contact info is here. If you have an idea, reach out.
But we are less engaged as Americans in politics than many, many other countries.
Yeah.
And they have estimated over 90 American people eligible to vote did not vote in 2024.
Yeah.
Only 77 and 76, something like that, 135 million voted. That's outrageous.
More people did not vote than voted for either major candidate.
Yes.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And even more so, I don't know how many people who voted actually were informed voters. And I don't mean that to diminish anyone, but at the end of the day, between the
Let's diminish American voters. They deserve to. We deserve to be diminished. We don't have good political education in this country. We don't vote. You just said it. It's sad.
Well, not only do we not vote, but we also have people that are working harder than they've ever had to work. The amount of people who are working quite literally 2.5 full-time jobs just to survive. And so I have a lot of empathy for the people who are out there working who have a really hard time
And then we have people who want to limit the amount of voting you can do. They want to take you off the rolls. They want to take away the short lines and have big lines and take away voting. I mean, you know what's going on in terms of that, in terms of what the Trump administration is doing to take away the elections in 2026. That's another story. But so you learned that you need to ask people what they want, but then only a handful of people really could tell you.
But I think the bigger point is people want to be heard.
Yeah.
And people don't feel heard right now across the board. And
Right.
towards the end of the book, I just kind of, not haphazardly, but kind of passive aggressively just listed out all of the policy areas where 2/3 or more of Americans agree, and none of them are policy yet.
Right, and that's so interesting and they've done that before, that a lot of the policy things that are in your book about, economics and jobs and education and taxes, 90, 100% of people almost agree with them, but when it comes to the implementation, we've got these two parties that are killing each other,
Yeah.
right? So I know you have these fair deal for America. Is that what you have in your appendix?
Yeah.
So give us just a few of the ideas. If you get into office tomorrow, what's the first thing you want to implement? If you can.
Get money out of politics.
Okay. What else? What's the second most important thing?
Make buybacks of corporate stock illegal. Make rules around what corporations are allowed to do. So in America, it shouldn't be possible for you to work a full-time job and still be earning SNAP benefits. Not because SNAP benefits are so generous, but because you literally don't get paid enough to survive. You should be able to work a full-time job and earn a living wage regardless of where you live in this country. I would say other things that I'm really passionate about in that list of a fair deal, things like, I'm on the Board of Education. I don't speak for the board right now. I'm speaking as an individual, but school shootings and gun violence in this country. Yet the vast majority of Americans agree on simple things like red flag laws. And if you have a history of mental illness or a history of conflicts with law enforcement, that maybe you shouldn't be allowed to buy a firearm. Most Americans agree on things like that. And the amount of shootings we have.
They're not national laws. We have them in Connecticut, but it doesn't seem to make a difference when people can come from other states or other places. Right. And just the volume, sheer volume of guns that we have in this country seems to be an impediment to even nice, good laws being passed. Don't you feel that? That's how I feel sometimes. Just the sheer volume. More guns in America than people.
There are more guns in America than people. There's also a culture around gun ownership in this country that, in my opinion, doesn't really match reality. And I also think we don't have enough politicians who have experience firsthand of what using these weapons actually entail. And so my solution for I don't want to call it just a gun issue, but the current debate is very much pro-gun control, anti-gun control, and that's about it. I really think we need to have a serious conversation about training requirements. If you want to own a deer hunting rifle to go deer hunting on your safety course, it makes sense to me. If for whatever reason you want to own an AR-15 style weapon, I want you to have the same level of training that our military and police enforcement that uses those weapons go through, because I've used those weapons in real life, and I can tell you, without training, they are incredibly dangerous to the person wielding it and everyone else around them.
Sure.
The level of training in this country for gun ownership is tragically limited.
Yeah.
And that's in part because of lobbyists, that's in part because of culture, it's in part because of a lot of things.
Yeah.
But I think if you instituted rules like that and you realize you can actually work with the local gun clubs and the gun and rod clubs that we have here in Eastern Connecticut and whatnot, and they could be part of the solution, I think that would become the new norm.
But the main thing to solve the issue that you talk about, the economic inequality and the inability to rise because of the overwhelming power of money and influence. And we see that in the basic oligarchy that we have in our country now. What's the main solution to that, the main thrust of your ideas on that?
So I would say two quick things. One, we have to find a way to tax billionaires. Right now, the billionaire class are able to pay less in taxes than their own secretaries are, and that is insane. And there's a bunch of different ways to tax wealth that we haven't yet implemented.
They used to have a 75% bracket, right, years ago.
Something under Eisenhower is like a 90% bracket.
Okay.
Yeah. And, we have these myths about things like the Laffer curve and other things in political science that were kind of just made up that prop up this idea, but like none of it is true. And so we need more people to be talking about what is actually true in this world of economics and to be able to follow through and tax wealth in a new way. And we can use that wealth to things like pay down the $37 trillion national debt we have that is a tax on everyone that comes after us. We can use that wealth to actually improve people's lives. We can use that wealth to make government actually govern and not just be bystanders to everything that we see happening. And so there's a lot of different things we can use that wealth for as a country, but outside of the billionaire sort of taxing of wealth is the corporate profit side. If we go back to the profit margins we had in the 1980s before Reagan took office, we would see about everything you buy right now be somewhere about 12 to 20% less expensive, and you will be earning about 20% more than what you're earning now, which if you add those two things together, we would all feel like we have it pretty good.
Right. So all these ideas you're talking about, they need to be put into practice in the Congress. We have a Senate and a House of Representatives, and then the president has to sign them into law. That's a big lift, right? All right. So are you going to run for office? Are you going to run for national office someday? Is that something you're thinking about?
I would love to someday.
Yeah.
We obviously have a very popular and great congressman here in Eastern Connecticut right now, but everyone retires at some point, and I would love to take these ideas down to Washington, D.C. and try to break through the noise and the inaction there. But in order to do that, I think you're exactly right that we need to change the rules around the economics. We also need to change the rules around our election to make them more competitive, to get money out of it, so that we can always...
Well, now you have to have money. You can't run for national office unless you've got a lot of money.
Right. Or you're able to build a national movement or a
Right.
political movement. And that's the sort of third pillar here.
Right.
And that's part of the effort of putting the book out, is to say, hey, there is a better future for all of us, but it's also going to take all of us. So let's start educating people.
Okay, so your book is a way to try to educate. Say, look, this is how I grew up. This is what I learned. This is what I think we need to do now. So people reading the book, what should they do?
So I actually put in the book this idea that do whatever you feel passionate about. First of all, get yourself educated, read the book by all means, but take what you learn and go do something with it. If you start as simple as having the conversations with our own family members that we haven't talked to in the last 10 years, because maybe they're huge MAGA supporters and you don't like talking to them, that's a great place to start. If you're a musician and you want to make some art about what's going on right now, make some art. If you're an artist, another way, make other
Should we
forms of
go
art.
to the No Kings protests, participate in those?
Go protest, do it safely, but make your voice heard. And the more people that do that, the more that you'll see the people in power start to change their behaviors. And if you don't do that, the more likely they are to keep going on the road that they're going on. Even Trump himself, when he starts getting a lot of pushback for something, he will find a way to pivot to something else.
TACO, Trump always chickens out.
Trump does always chicken out, TACO, I like that.
But he's too busy with 12 other projects a day to keep them going.
Yeah. To that, though, there's also a lot of power to realizing you're not alone. There's a lot of other people who agree with you.
Right.
And that's what a lot of those protests also do for you as an individual.
Right. Do you have a website besides the book? What's your website?
It's chrisrivers.com.
Very easy, chrisrivers.com. Yeah. And so now, as we close, I want you to summarize your book in one paragraph. What do you want to? How would you want to leave us? Why should I buy this book? What does it tell me? Tell me that in one paragraph, Chris.
In one paragraph, I would say this. This book is really an American story. It's my story to share with everyone that you're not alone if you feel like the economic system is rigged against you, and to actually understand how it's actually rigged. It also tells the American story of how we create a political system that doesn't actually respond to what most people want, and how we use politics to create the division that we're seeing today. And most importantly, it provides hope that we can do a different path forward that could be better for all of us, and invites you with enough education and information to actually be a part of the change, not just a reader of it.
Okay, great. That was a long paragraph, but
Sorry.
you did it.
Yep.
That was good. All right, I hope everyone has learned something by listening to Chris, and here's the book again. And now I understand from Chris earlier told me that it is going to be an audiobook as well. Right?
That's right. So from the moment this
and
is
he's the
airing,
narrator, so if you enjoyed listening to him, you can buy the audiobook, I guess. Okay. All right. We're living in tough times, but Chris has one good reason to be hopeful and to study, learn, and take your experiences and make them useful for the future. Okay. See you all next time on Talkback. Bye.